Okay, let's talk about Rosalia's new album because this isn't just music, it's a full on spiritual experience for her and for us listening. This album deals with subjects such as sainthood, mysticism, religion, obviously, and what it means to be divine. On this video, I wanted to talk about who inspired her. She explained that while making this album, she was reading a lot and she got inspired by so many women. And I thought it was interesting because in a lot of interviews, she explained she wanted to look for what it means to be a saint, for the divine, and she didn't look for the answers to the questions that she had in the usual places that we think of when we think about religions and saints. She, as I said, looked for a lot of amazing women, and I thought it was super interesting. So I chose some women that she talked about, and I wanted to have a look at them. So in an interview with Popcast, she explained that she always had a desire to get closer to God. She said, I think I've always had a desire of how can I get close to God? How can I get closer to God? That spiritual feeling has always been there, and it's just that I haven't rationalized it or tried to intellectualize it, if that makes sense. This whole album is not about religion and spirituality in the traditional sense. It's about a feeling, something very personal, and a journey that she took, reading about these women and writing those songs. So she explained that this album was kind of like a research project. So she read a lot of biographies of saints. Now, there is quite a contrast with Motomami because it was quite, bold and fiery, and Lux is very introspective and mystical. What I thought also was interesting and kind of explain how she approached making this album is the idea of being a vessel. The main inspiration is feminine mystic, so then for sure there's more feminine energy, and also the idea of being a vessel. I was reading the other day, this woman, Ursula, says that maybe the first cultural device in history was not a weapon. It was not something sharp to kill something. Maybe it was a vessel, something where you can gather things. And so she was saying that there's a difference between masculine writing and feminine writing. Masculine writing is about the hero, the triumphs of the hero. And if the hero is not in the story, then it's not a good story. It's all about the conflict and the narrative. Feminine writing, it's more about an ongoing process. It's not about the climax and then the resolution. It's about maybe a person with disillusions and transformation and all the things that this person has to lose. It's not about me, hi. It's more about how can we make space for all of this that has happened before to exist in it too. So as you can tell from this extract, she is not just talking about music, she's talking about storytelling, which music is a form of storytelling. And she's comparing how women and men tell stories. She says that men are more about triumphs and heroes and battles, while women are more about process and changes and even loss while telling stories, which I thought was very interesting because Lux really does feel like a journey into spirituality and not just a destination. Okay, so now we are going to talk about the inspiration. So she had a lot of inspiration that she shared, a lot of saints. I chose to, to reduce some of those inspiration to focus on some of them who I thought were most interesting. So as I said, she said that she spent a lot of time reading while making this album. And those women are women that inspired her. The first one is Hildegard of Bingen, which apparently inspired Berghain. Hildegard of Bingen, she was a Benedictine abbess, writer, composer, naturalist, and she was also a mystic. She was born into an aristocratic family, and she entered the monastery of Dizy Bodenberg at the age of 8, and she became an abbess in 1836. And she later founded her own ministry. So Hildegard started to have visions from the age of 3, and these visions were recognized and encouraged by prominent religious figures like Bernard of Clairvaux and Pope Eugene III. So, as I said, she's starting to have those visions at the age of 3. She said she heard voices and could not control her movements or speech. So, obviously, as she was 3, no one really believed her. But it is only in her 40s that she started to share those visions. She wrote, "And behold, in the 43rd year of my earthly course, as I was gazing with great fear and troubling attention at a heavenly vision, I saw a great splendor in which resounded a voice from heaven saying to me, 'O fragile human, ashes of ashes and fields of fields, say and write what you see and hear.'" She will later put those visions into a book called the Scivias and then put them into music in the Ordo Virtutum. She became a huge musical inspiration to a lot of artists and to Rosalía herself. Despite being a woman in a very male-dominated society, she was respected as a prophetic voice, and she referred as herself as homo, which it means human being, rather than emphasizing her gender. In her vision, which I thought was very interesting, they were vividly depicted in illuminate manuscripts. They blend cosmology, sacred history, and prophecy. So it's not just quite, as we can imagine Christian visions to be. They blend a lot of other aspects, which I thought might have inspired and attracted Rosalía to her. Next, we have Simone Weil. So not a religious figure, but she wrote a lot about religion. I mean, it was a big point of interest for her. So she was kind of obsessed with the idea of suffering, attention, and love. And in Gravity and Grace, which Rosalía quoted, she said, "To love purely is to consent to distance. It is to adore the distance between ourselves and that which we love." So, in other words, true love is not about possession and control, it's about understanding and surrender. Who was Simone Weil? She was a philosopher, a humanist, an activist, and her work was deeply rooted in empathy for the oppressed and a relentless pursuit of truth and justice. She was born in Paris into a Jewish but agnostic family. She was the youngest sister of the renowned mathematician André Weil. She was a very brilliant student and she studied philosophy under the philosopher Alain. And she became the youngest woman to pass the agrégation in philosophy at the age of 22. So the agrégation is a diploma, very prestigious diploma to teach philosophy. Despite suffering from chronic migraines and poor health, she dedicated her life to her activism and intellectual inquiry. Political activism led her to teach in provincial schools, and she also supported labor movements and worker strikes. She also traveled to Germany in the early 30s to study the rise of Hitler and to warn about the dangers of fascism. She also participated in the Spanish Civil War to fight against Franco forces. But her experience of violence led her to distance herself from revolutionary politics. Now, about her spiritual journey, which most interests her here. Her journey into spirituality was marked by a deep exploration of Christianity, but she never formally converted to Christianity. She said that Christianity was a religion of slaves and she saw herself as part of this tradition. She wrote about her spiritual journey in Gravity and Grace and Waiting for God, which reflect a belief in the unity of thought and action and a quest for a spirituality rooted in empathy and self sacrifice. She also studied other religions like Buddhism, Hinduism, and ancient Egyptian and Greek religions. Now, the next woman is Vimala. Rosalía said about Vimala, she was a nun. She was one of the first nuns who was a poet in India. She wrote this book called Terigata. That woman was a prostitute. That's a very different idea of what the life of a saint is. There is not a lot of information about Vimala herself. I wanted to include her because I wanted to have women from different places and times, and she was the only Buddhist she mentioned, so I thought it was very interesting to keep her. But the Terigata, the book that she mentioned in English, is Verses of the Elder Nuns. It's a collection of poems attributed to Buddhist nuns in ancient India. So Vimala, she wrote in the Terigata, and she was one of the first Buddhist nuns, and a poet whose work was collected in the book. So less is known about her than the other women, as I said, but the poem led us to know that she was a former prostitute who became a nun and wrote poetry. And so her life challenges the idea of, that being a saint meant having to be pure or chaste, which obviously interested Rosalía in her quest for spirituality. The next woman I wanted to talk about was Saint Olga of Kiev, which apparently inspired De Madruga. So, as you can see, I mean, De Madruga is very dark and hypnotic, and you will hear Saint Olga of Kiev's story, and you will see how that inspired her. So Rosalia herself said she was a ruler and she basically sent so many men to be killed. That's maybe not the story of a saint that we are used to here. So through making this album, it helped me to explain my idea of what sainthood is. So Saint Olga of Kiev, she lived in the 10th century and she's one of the most iconic figures in Eastern Orthodox history. So her story blends political power and revenge, basically. So she was the wife of Prince Inger of Kiev, and after her husband was assassinated by Drevlian tribes, she found herself in power. And to take revenge on her husband's death, she took a series of brutal acts of revenge. So I'm just going to read about the whole story. So, according to historical accounts, she first invited the envoys to Kiev, where she had them buried alive. She then sent a message to the Drevlian people to feign submission and request that they send their finest soldiers to escort her to their prince. And when these warriors arrived, Olga ordered a bathhouse to be prepared, and she locked the door and burned them alive. That's not the last of her revenge. She later tricked the Drevlian army into celebrating with a copious amount of alcohol, and once they were all incapacitated, she led an expedition to the Drevlian capital, where she razed the city to the ground, leaving no doubt about her resolve to protect Kiev and people. So that's quite a long story and a lot of revenge involved. After the death of her husband, her reign was not just marked by those acts of revenge. She played a crucial role to maintain political and economic stability in the region. And her leadership helped to lay the foundations for Kievan Rus, ensuring that the regions remained a significant power in Eastern Europe. Now, about her religion, after she traveled to Constantinople, she converted to Christianity. So the Eastern Orthodox and Greek Catholic churches honor her with the title Is Apostolos, which means equal to the apostle. It's a very rare and prestigious distinction that reflects her role in the spread of Christianity. The next figure we have is Rabia al Adawiyya. She is a very important figure in Sufism, which is the spiritual and mystical dimension of Islam. She was born in Iraq under the Abbasid dynasty, and she rose from poverty to become a central figure in Sufism. Her early life was marked by suffering. She was orphaned and enslaved. She eventually gained her freedom, and she dedicated her life to prayers and religion. And like many women at the time, she refused marriage because she wanted to focus on her spirituality. She famously said, I do not want the Kaaba, I want the master of the Kaaba, which illustrates a rejection of ritualism to establish a direct relationship with God. Her life was a radical act of defiance against the patriarchal norms of the 8th century. She hosted spiritual gathering in a home where she engaged in debates with male scholars and mystics. What was also interesting was her relation to nature and wildlife, such as gazelles that will gather around her without fear. And when she was asked why those animals trusted her instead of fearing her by her companion Hassan al-Basri, she replied, "How could they not flee from you when you eat their fats?" Which was a very modern critique of animal exploitation. Rabia al Adawiyya inspired Rosalía for the track La Yugular. It's the title is a reference to a Quranic verse which says, "We are closer to them than their jugular vein," which represents this deep and intimate relations to the divine in Islam. And you can also hear how Rosalía was inspired by Rabia al Adawiyya's idea of loving God for his own sake rather than for fear of punishment or for wanting a reward. In the lyric, she sings in Arabic, "For you, I will destroy the sky. For you, I will tear down hell. No promises, no threats." So you can really hear in those lyrics how they reflect Rabia's teachings, and they emphasize a love so pure that it transcends all conditions. And also in another lyric, you can see Rabia's influence when she said that she had no time to hate Lucifer because she was too busy loving God. She thinks, "Look, I don't have time to hate Lucifer. I'm too busy loving you, Undibel," which Undibel is a Romani term used in Andalusian culture. This fusion of Sufi and Romanist culture was very interesting because it really reflects Rabia's message of universal love and devotion to the divine. The next woman that she mentioned and that I chose to include is Myriam. I wanted to include her because she's a Jewish woman, and she explained that she is the closest thing to a saint in Judaism. She was the sister of Moses and a prophetess, and she helped to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. About her, Rosalía said, in Judaism, maybe the closest to being a saint is Myriam. She was a prophet, a woman who led. She guided an entire people, and she was very rebellious. That is why it is considered maybe in Judaism the closest to an idea of sainthood. So while her brothers Moses and Aaron are more known in the story of the Exodus, she is often overlooked, but she played also a crucial role in the liberation of the Israelites out of Egypt in the story of the Exodus, and the formation of the identity of God's chosen people in the Hebrew Bible. And what is interesting as well is that she did not just play a role in the Exodus, she played a role before. When Pharaoh orders the baby male infants to be killed, she actually saved her brother Moses. Moses' mother placed him in a basket among the reeds of the Nile, and Miriam stood there. And when Pharaoh's daughter found Moses, Miriam suggested that a Hebrew nurse should be found and care for him, and that Hebrew nurse was Moses' mother. So that act of quick thinking and bravery ensured that Moses survived and that his future role as a leader could be fulfilled. And Miriam is explicitly cited as a prophetess in Exodus chapter 15, verses 20 through to 21, when she leads the women of Israel in the Song of Triumph after crossing the Red Sea. And she's also cited alongside Moses and Aaron as the leader sent by God to guide Israel in Micah chapter 6, verse 4. And so her role is seen as equal to Moses and Aaron in that verse. And she was not only a leader, she was also a bold critic. In Numbers 12, she and Aaron criticized Moses' marriage to a Cushite woman. And they questioned whether God was speaking only through Moses or also through them. This criticism led Myriam to be struck with leprosy, but this episode also highlights her importance because the Israelites refused to move on without her. So Moses and Aaron had to interfere for her healing. Here you can see the importance that Myriam had in her community as a leader because they refused to move on without her. And I think Rosalía found her willingness to find injustice quite interesting, and also the way she took up space and did not hesitate to speak among her two brothers and fight for injustice and fight for her people. Now, the last woman I wanted to mention is a Japanese woman who inspired the song Porcelana, and it's Ryōnen Gensō. She was a Japanese poet, Zen master, and calligrapher whose life story is marked by a relentless pursuit of spirituality and enlightenment. At the age of 16 or 17, she entered an arranged marriage with Matsuda Bensui, who was a Confucian scholar and doctor. She raised many children before she chose to become a nun. Her journey to fulfillment was met with a lot of obstacles, and the main one was her beauty. At Kofukuji Temple, she was told that she was too attractive to join their monastic community. She was told that might distract the male monks. Now, to overcome this obstacle of her own beauty, she took a very drastic step. She disfigured her own face by pressing a hot iron against her skin. Now, this shocking act of, say, self-mutilation shocked society, but it worked because she was accepted as a student by Haruko Dotai, and she quickly became a star pupil. And in 1682, she received a certificate of enlightenment, which is a very rare honor for a Zen master. What I think Rosalía was attracted to in Ryōnen's story was her commitment, ultimate commitment to her spirituality. She burned her own face in order to join this monastery that she wanted to join, and it worked, and she became a Zen master. So I think through all those women, we can understand why LUX feels so important. What I like is that she gave so many inspiration from so many different religious backgrounds, non-religious like Simone Weil, but also from a lot of parts of the world. We had Iraq, we had Japan, we had Europe, and I thought it was super interesting to see where she looked for her inspiration to find answers on her spirituality. And I also love how she made those references feel very modern because she adapted them to her own journey. And also the sound, I think it sounded quite modern. It blended sacred sounds with more electronic sounds, with some flamenco, some fado from Portugal. So it felt timeless because it was ancient and modern at the same time. And also, I think the message is so obviously what she said is the different form of sainthood. It's not just about our idea of being a saint, being pure. It can also be about being powerful, about being resilient. And I think all of these women have that powerfulness, that commitment to their own journey and their resilience. I hope you enjoyed that little walk through the women who inspired her, her readings. I only selected a few because there were a lot of other saints, but I wanted to pick a quite diverse women in terms of geography, but also in terms of religious backgrounds. I hope you enjoyed them. And do you have any favorite characters? And also, do you have any favorite song on the album? And thank you for watching this first video. I really enjoyed making this video about Rosalía because I love her music. And I hope you enjoyed the album and this video too.